take on all of you.
Oh no! He life swapped me! Oh no! Oh no, guys! Oh! Whoops! Oh! Vampiric! Oh! Nerf Wraith, guys! Nerf Wraith! If you read the latest Deadlock patch notes, you might think they nerfed Warden, but it's actually the complete opposite. This character is busted. What's up, friends? This is Metro, and welcome to the best build I have ever done for any character in the game. And I truly mean that. And this is not clickbait. This is my new Gun Warden build, and I think running this in the game makes Warden completely broken if you understand how to play it. I think it's the actual counter to the meta, which right now is basically a lot of spirit and a lot of burst and a lot of high HP characters, right? The meta right now really revolving around Shiv, Abrams, Calvin, right? And then a lot of spirit burst like Pocket, Dynamo, you know, the list goes on and on. There's so many examples of like, I think right now the meta is you want to build really tanky or you die and everyone kills you in 1 second. And this build counters all of this and more. Well, the main three things that make this build work are Cultist Sacrifice, Arcane Surge, and then Fury Trance, which is our big power spike. And this item got a lot better, but as always, we'll start with the laning phase. I'll explain every item, how it works, and then I'll give you the power spikes, how to play the build. And yeah, if you have any questions, as always, leave them in the comments, and I will try to make this one not like 50 minutes like the last one. We are starting off the lane with monster rounds, and ideally we rush Cultist Sacrifice as first item. This item got a change to where if you die in lane now, it stays active. So you don't lose the buff, the 25% fire rate, the bonus health, and the ability range when you die, which makes this item way more consistent, because no matter how good or bad you are, there were situations in the game where you die, and this item just felt bad. Now it is a lot more solid, and I think it is an insane item on Warden, because it gives you ability range, something Warden really wants for both his cage, his ult, right, and more. It gives you damage against NPCs, which means farming, one of the iffy points on Warden, becomes a lot easier. It gives you out of combat regen, which makes it insane in lane, because once you get this, you really don't need extra regen anymore. Sometimes I end up buying extra regen. People ask me why I have rebuttal in this build. It's only against Viscous, so if I'm against Viscous in a lane, this is a really good item to counter the melees. But usually, I end up skipping this altogether now, and I go for Cultist first. Monster rounds give me some regen. Warden still has pretty high base regen of 3, so you don't really need this. And once you get to Cultist, the first thing you do in lane is you sacrifice a lane creep. And the reason you sacrifice a lane creep is it's the highest souls of any creep in the game until tier 3 spawns, okay? So this is a lot more money than, for example, a tier 2 creep would be. And don't look at the top of the map. I spent a lot of time refining this build. Do not look at the timer. We've been in this lobby for a while, and I finally got around to recording it. The first thing you do is sacrifice a lane creep, and at this point you're really strong in lane. Your cage becomes suddenly way more scary because it has a lot more reach, right? A lot more range, and your ult becomes a lot scarier. And then you go for Extended and Titanic Magazine. Titanic Magazine got a slight nerf, depending on when you're watching this. It's a bit weaker, but it is an insanely solid item on Warden. It allows us to do everything we do in this build. So do not skip Titanic Magazine. We end up getting quicksave reload a lot later. Reason being is usually we one-clip enemies with this build, and we don't need the extra reload when we have Titanic Magazine. And then we go into Extra Stam because it upgrades into Arcane Surge, and we're going Arcane Surge right away. And this item becomes useful no matter how early you get it in the game, okay? The way it works is, if you haven't played around with Arcane Surge yet, you jump dash and you get the bonus range on the next ability you use. You get bonus duration and you get bonus spirit power on the ability you use. So you can use this on any ability you like. And the two abilities we want to use this on, or the three abilities, is we want to use it on cage, we want to use it on ult, and we want to use it on Cultist Sacrifice. So if you guys don't know, this works on items. So what you can do is, before the next time we activate Cultist, which it's still on cooldown right now, it's a very long cooldown, right? But the next time we want to use Cultist, we always want to eat a tier 3 creep. Because at that point in the game, we, you know, tier 3 camps spawned and they give more money than a lane trooper. So we want to consume a tier 3 creep. But we want to jump dash and activate Arcane Surge before we do it. Because as you can see, it extends the duration of Cultist by basically almost, yeah, by 26 seconds. Which, you know, at that point, the downtime of Cultist is only 60 instead of 80. And so basically it's just a free 30 seconds extra of Cultist Sacrifice, right? And it's really easy to pull that off, right? So once you're off cooldown, what you do is jump dash before you eat a tier 3. And at this point, you're gonna have basically 200 seconds of Cultist Sacrifice active, right? So if you wanna know the timing, the only time you're gonna feel weak is the last 60 seconds of Cultist Sacrifice cooldown. The other 200 seconds it's running. You're gonna feel really, really powerful. And again, yeah, at this point, we have the ability range and we have the ability range of Arcane Surge. So at this point, we can already, at this point, I usually level Alchemical Flask 2, right? And then I go 1 in Willpower, 1 in Binding Word, and then we max ult first. We jump dash, and our cage is already an insanely big range because we get both the ability or the reach from Cultist and from Arcane Surge. So we have a really lethal kill combo and we don't even need slowing hex, which is why we go Fleetfoot first, because I really like the movement speed early. This helps with box farming, which is another great thing to do, especially on Warden early on. Boxes are way better since the big item update. 60% of the time they spawn souls now, right? So it's more money, especially early on. It's more efficient to farm boxes than to farm creeps. And the gold statues also have a 60% drop. I mean, if you've played Warden, any Warden, this is a self-explanatory item, right? It reduces, or it removes our movement speed while we're shooting, so we can chase targets really easy. We can catch up really easy. We can use this with the ult to, you know, stay in range. And then we go slowing hex. I went into the item build a tiny bit. The ult is still really, really strong, especially early on, right? Because early on, again, we proc, before we start the ult, we proc Arcane Surge and we have extended duration on it, more spirit power and more reach, right? So every time before you ult, if you can, ideally, you want to use Arcane Surge. And yeah, then we have Slowing Hex, and at the point we have Slowing Hex, right, we can do the classic combo of we cage, Slowing Hex, blast them, and if you do it correctly, a lot of the time the enemy will get trapped, right? We have a really high fire rate from Cultist Sacrifice. So at this point, we're already really strong, but this is not even our power spike. At this point, we can gank, we can farm boxes, and we can start farming tier 2 camps. Because again, with Titanic, it is feasible to farm jungle camps. I think of Warden more so as an early and mid-game ganker, right? He's really strong early mid-game, but this is not even our strongest form. After this, we get Backstabber and Slowing Bullets. And here I want to mention something basically no other build considers for any character, which I think is one of the biggest deals in this patch, which is hitting thresholds for certain weapon investments, right? Or vitality and spirit investments. Hitting the threshold gives you insane extra value. The reason we're running 2 1600 items here, which seems really random, right? We're buying a lot of 1600 items. The reason we're running this is because this is going to allow us to get to 58% bonus weapon damage really early. And this is an insane power spike on its own. Like, think about it this way. What Slowing Bullets does for us here, or Backstabber, right, is it not only gives us the bonus of the effect of the item, it also gives us another 18% weapon damage on top. So hitting these thresholds is incredibly important, especially early on, because they add a lot of value and add a lot of damage, right? So here we're going for 2 1600 items, and these 1600 items feel pretty random, right? Like, why not go for something like Burst Fire, right? Or Berserk, right? One of the classics on Warden. But the reason we're running these two is very simple. Backstabber will almost always proc at this point, okay? Because if you run into an enemy and cage them, they will walk away from you most likely, right? They won't run towards you. So you will proc Backstabber, which is gonna add the 100 spirit damage over time. It's gonna add bullet debuff resist or bullet resist, reduce the bullet resist of the enemies, and it's going to give us that movement speed, right? Also will make it so our ganking is way easier because they hear us 50% less, right? I've demonstrated this already, but I'll demonstrate it again in this video. Backstabber is insane. just because you can't hear the enemy. Demonstration of the Infernus here, right? We hear the Infernus, we hear the Infernus, and you can still kind of hear it in the background. I'll try to be quiet here. You can still hear him a bit, and now the footstep is gone. So he's very far away at this point, right? That's a very long distance. And at this point, you can start hearing them, right? And now, I'm gonna give this guy Backstabber. We're gonna buy Backstabber for him. And now we start hearing him. And 50% doesn't sound like a lot, but if you see it visually, it's insane, right? That's like half the distance. And this is why you don't run Backstabber in lane. This is why it's an early mid-game item that is insane for ganking, which becomes valuable even until the late game. We'll sell this way later down the line if we don't have slots. But this item is a mid-game ganking item because it allows us to, you know, be on top of the enemy before they can even hear us if we approach it properly, but also then allows us to chase, right? Even if we don't cage them, we will get the almost 2 meter a second movement speed on them, and we'll get the bullet resist on them, and we have bonus health. So this is just an insane item in terms of value, and so is slowing bullets. Gives us more fire rate, which is something we really like on Warden, right? The more fire rate, the better, basically. But more importantly, it slows the enemy down even further, which makes us hit more cages. And even if we don't hit the cages, it makes it really easy to close the distance. And in this build, we really need to be close to the enemy because the big power spike is going to be Fury Trance. After this, we buy Battle Vest. This is just the first green item. Gives us a good spike in extra health, 10% I think it is. Yeah, so it gives us 10% extra health, plus bullet resist, plus weapon damage, plus fire rate. Warden, you're usually the one that engages in the fight, so this bonus effect of the weapon damage and fire rate is going to be active, right? And we have bullet resist. So it makes us tankier and makes us do more damage. And then we go right into Fury Trance. Well, we buy Bullet Lifesteal because it builds into Fury Trance and Fury Trance. And at this point, we're Jesus. If at this point you have the same net worth as the enemy, or, you know, if you're anywhere close to the enemy's net worth, you will kill anyone in the game 1v1. Anyone. And I promise you that. This item is completely broken now, and all they changed is they made it 40% spirit resist when it's active instead of bullet resist. And this might not sound like a lot, but resists are really hard to come by, right? Especially spirit resist was really hard to come by before this patch. But more so, everyone on the other team usually runs spirit damage, right? You play against spirit characters, and if they end up being like a haze or like a wraith and they do some gun damage, you still have the battle vest and you will win the 1v1 because you will do more damage than them at this point. But Fury Trance is ridiculous. This item is truly broken on Warden. I think it's the best item in the game on Warden. I think people just misuse it, right? So what it does is, if you have not played it, it gives you 40% fire rate and the resist, but it removes all stamina usage and it silences you, which sounds really bad on paper, right? So I can't dash, right? I can't dash, I can't even slide, and I can't use any abilities. Sounds really bad. But we don't actually care about that on Warden. Why? Because we're the one initiating and we use all our spells before this happens, right? So usually how you would set up a fight at this point is, again, depending on if you have ult or not, right? You can jump dash and ult, or you jump dash and set up the cage. Let's assume you don't ult and you're just going for a gank on one person. You jump dash, cage, slowing hex, nade, right? And they're trapped. You can also proc your willpower if you want. And at that point, after you used everything in your arsenal, you proc Fury Trance. And ideally you want to be as close as possible to the enemy, because again, at that point, you will slow down because you can't jump dash anymore and you can't dash. But again, you still have Fleet Foot if needed, right? And you probably still have the Backstabber passive procced where you get movement speed. So on paper, or you know, in practice I should say, not on paper. In practice, it's actually really easy to keep up with the enemy. Most of the time they're trapped at this point, because again, like if you set it up properly, they will not be able to close the distance, right? So I'll demonstrate it again. It's super essential. You jump dash, and then you have 7 seconds. Arcane Surge is active for 7 seconds, so within 7 seconds you want to cage first. And the reason you want to cage first, unless you want to ult in a big team fight, right, which is obviously the correct choice. The reason you want to cage first is this only works on the first spell you use it on, right, Arcane Surge. And items count. So if you would use Slowing Hex first, or you would use Alchemical Flask first, or Willpower first, yeah, they would get these bonuses, right? Like Alchemical Flask would do a bit more damage. Willpower would give a bit more duration and a bit more overshield. And even Fleetfoot would get a bit more duration, funnily enough, you know, like an extra second or two. But we care about the cage range the most, right? So we jump dash, cage, Slowing Hex, and nade. And then we use willpower before we proc Fury Trance. And at that point, we have every ability used, and we don't care if we're silenced, and we don't care that we have a reduction in or a stamina disabled, because we don't need the stamina. We're insanely fast, and worst case, we can pop Fleetfoot, right? So again, jump dash. I fucked it up. So jump dash, cage, Slowing Hex, everything else, and then you press 3. And I know I did that very fast. That's kind of how fast you want to get there. It's not that hard to do. Like, once you get the hang of it, it's not that hard to do, but I'll do it slower one more time. Jump dash, cage, Slowing Hex, nade, willpower, right? They're trapped, and then we press 3. And this does ridiculous amounts of damage, and nobody will live. And if they try to fight back for whatever reason, right? If they use any spells on you, like I had pockets like trying to burst me down, I have 40% spirit resist. I don't care about anything, right? The only thing I really care about is like maybe Haze ult, but Haze ult I get out of the radius and I'm fine, right? We have incredible amounts of resists. Even if there's like a team fight going on and I go on one person and another person tries to nuke me down, I just don't take damage, right? And because I have so much damage and fire rate on Fury Trance, I regen life the entire time, right? This is like the most healing I've done in this patch, right? Lifesteal got a lot weaker, but this is a ridiculous lifesteal, right? So jump dash, Slowing Hex, use everything, and then you empty your magazine, and you can even proc Fleetfoot, and you can slide to extend the ammo. But as you can see, you know, that's the one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to end up having to reload during Fury Trance, because then you really can't do anything. But it's very easy to not run out of ammo until, you know, this is off, and then you can reload to whatever, and you have your spells again. And then after that, we go into Quicksilver reload, and then right away into Mercurial, and this is just another power spike of damage. Mercurial is still a great item, it did get nerfed, but we really only throw one flask at the start of the fight, right? Which means that one magazine is the magazine that counts, and that one magazine is gonna do, well, in this case, 62% extra spirit damage, and we have more fire rate, right? Now you might ask, why not use Spell Slinger? Simple reason, you can't spam spells in this, right? Because you use your spells once. We max out willpower before Flask 2, because max out willpower gives us more scaling, gives us way more health, by the way, right? Like 600 overshield, which overshield or barriers now work with resistance, right? So we have a ridiculous amount of HP at this point. Yeah, the reason we're not running Spell Slinger in this build is simply because we don't really spam a lot of spells until like later down the line. And we don't need it, right? So at this point, use everything, and they should be dead at that point. If you don't realize how much DPS that is, they are most likely dead, especially if you do it with ult. But yeah, I just realized, why is Fleetfoot red? Am I not allowed to use... I would look like an absolute noob if I wasn't allowed to use Fleetfoot during this. No, you can. I don't know why it was red. Yeah. So you can... While you're silenced, you can still use Fleetfoot. And if you have that movement speed, right? Especially if you proc like something like Backstabber. If you have that movement speed, it's really easy to like slide to not have to reload. So yeah, we don't use Mercurial or Quicksilver reload really for the reload. We use it for the bonus fire rate and the bonus damage it gives us, right? And then the build is not done yet. It's not done yet, right? We already kill anything in the game, but it gets even more ridiculous. After we go escalating resilience, and at that point you never run out of ammo, because a nice side effect is that it gives us extra ammo. But this gives us 30% bullet resist for 24 seconds, right? So at this point, if we proc, like because we have such a high fire rate, it's really easy. If you look at bullet armor, it's really easy to get it up to max stacks on Warden, right? This fire rate is absolutely ridiculous. and it basically will be instant. So we have 40% resistance on both. For like really cheap, right? Keep that in mind. For like really cheap, while we have 22% lifesteal. And then we go Frenzy. And Frenzy also got changed, which it also gives us 40% spirit resist if we're below 50% health. But because we have so much regen and so much resistances and so much HP, we don't necessarily care about being low health. In fact, we become even stronger at half health. At half health, we get insane fire rate increases and insane movement rate increases, right? So if you take a longer, prolonged team fight and you end up in a situation where, you know, you have Frenzy, this is what happens. Where you're just insanely fast and you also are like, don't let me lie, right? I want to see the actual resistance before I tell you. Yeah, so we're at like 68% spirit resist now. 68% spirit resist. 45 almost bullet resist, and we have the fire rate of an Ivy on Warden, while having the movement speed of the fastest character in the game, like Cat Calico. And it's not done even. It's not done. Usually at some point, you know, some builds fall off, but in this build, you really feel like every single item you buy, you become even stronger and even stronger and even stronger. Then we go for Siphon Bullets, which, by the way, you can buy Siphon or Vampiric before Frenzy. They're all three really nice options. But Siphon Bullets got an insane buff this patch. It now steals every 0.7 seconds, which effectively increases the HP drain on the enemy by at around 12.5%. So it got a 12.5% buff to the damage you deal to the enemy with Siphon, and a 12.5% buff to the HP you get, because every time you proc it, right, you get that HP from the enemy, right? So this is another layer of sustain over being incredibly tanky with insane fire rate, insane lifesteal, and insane resistance, right? So this is just, you know, another layer. And at this point, we do need to sell stuff usually, right? At this point, I have like 2, maybe 3 flex slots. And at this point, I do sell Backstabber. And at this point, you can also sell Slowing Hex, because we are at the stage of the game where it's not even that essential anymore to cage enemies, because you just keep on running at Mach 5 and you just shoot everything. So I end up selling Slowing Hex if I need to, right? So we go for Siphon, and then we go for Vampiric Burst. And this is an absolute luxury late game upgrade, by the way. Because this synergizes really well with our build. Because if at any point in time we're actually scared of dying, we proc this, and we get, you know, 80% lifesteal, plus 40% extra fire rate, but also it gives us extra ammo. So what you can do is, you can go in, use your shit, and sorry, I used it too early there. You can go in, let me do that again. You can go in, use your stuff, right? Empty your magazine. And once you're about to run out of ammo, or you have to reload during Fury Trance, let's say Fury Trance is active, right? Let's say you have ult and your Fury Trance is active and you silence. You can just press 5, right? Or whatever your hotkey is, and you get another burst of ammo. Right, this is like an instant reload, even if we're silenced, and we don't have to spend any time reloading. But really, like, it's really super late game luxury, and it's like the last item I would probably buy. You just use it whenever you feel like in danger of dying. Like, for example, let's say you are like actually pretty low, right? And at this point, you know, you see our resist 70% and 50%. And let's say you're really low. Let's say you're really low, right? And you have nothing, no cooldowns anymore. You proc Vampiric and suddenly this happens. And keep in mind, the longer the fight goes, the better for you. Because you have Siphon running, right? So the longer the fight goes, the better you do. And I think at the end of this video, I'll show you another clip of the same game as of the intro clip, where the build was in action for a long time. Really to show you how broken it is. And to be fair, in that game, I was very much above the enemy in souls. It's pretty easy to keep up in souls with this build, because you can always cultist sacrifice, and you get so much money from killing enemies and killing creeps. But this build does insane in Eternus lobbies too. I've had games against Michaels where I just proc my shit and I don't die. I can go in like, with the ult, I can go in 1v3 and kill the entire enemy team. And I was actually debating on making this video not as bait, because Wraith got nerfed obviously with the patch, and I think it's quite a major nerf, and she's really weak now. And I'm kind of worried that like everyone is gonna start using this, and then they're gonna nerf Warden, and then I'm gonna be sad again, right? But it is, in my opinion, it is really ridiculous. It's the strongest build in the game for Warden. I do have another build that we can go over real quick, I guess. So this is a spirit version of the build. It's called Metro Spirit Threat Warden by the time you watch this video. You can check out this build too. It has a basic idea, but it goes heavily into ult, which, if you like ult Warden, also a really viable option. But I like feeling useful no matter what. And I do think the build I just showed you is better, even if you're a fan of ult, because you have enough spirit power in this build to still make the ult hurt like hell. But because you have so much sustain with the gun, you can be useful at any point in the game, and you just do way more left click damage yourself, right? With ult Warden, it's like you have a really fat ult and it either works out and you win, or it doesn't work out and you lose. And with this, you have a really fat ult, you don't die, and then everyone dies no matter if the ult is over or not, because you have ridiculous damage, ridiculous movement speed, etc, etc. So yeah, that's the best build I've ever done. Utility is needed. Obviously, if the enemy has a lot of stuns and they shut you down, buy Unstoppable. Practice counter spell. I'm buying this item more and more. It's absolutely broken. It can counter so many things in the game, right? So if you need defensive options, these two are probably key. There's a few other things I have in here, like debuff remover against like Infernus. Blood Tribute I'm experimenting with. Could be very good against like Moon Krill ult if you pop this, right? Because it gives you 50% debuff resist. Plated armor, obviously, if there's a lot of gun damage, which there isn't right now. Armor piercing, I almost never buy this, I gotta be honest. Like, usually I buy this and then maybe counter spell or Unstoppable, one of those two. And I follow this build, you know, from left to right until the end, and it works against like almost every comp in the game. Again, let me know what you think. Don't abuse this in game too much, because it's gonna get nerfed, and then I'm gonna be sad again. And yeah, until next time, see you friends, bye bye.